Hey everyone, I am TheChosenOneLegend here, as always joined by my co-host.
Hi, I'm Kai, also known as Vascarine.
And welcome back to the BunchaJokahs podcast, where this video, we've got a little bit of Switch stuff to talk about, because very recently, just randomly on Twitter, because that's how Nintendo roll nowadays sometimes, they announced that we're getting news about the Switch 2 within this fiscal year, so that'll be by April, I believe. And that before then we're going to be getting a direct on the remaining Switch games in June. So I guess whichever ones will tide us over till the successor eventually releases. And this sort of has prompted us here to think about, okay, we know there are a few more games coming out for the Switch, it's not over yet. But given that they're saving their big ones for the next console, we're probably going to be getting some smaller releases, like the remasters we've had recently, like the Nintendo World Championships that was just announced. And basically in this video, we're going to speculate on both what those are, what those could be, but also what games might make their way to the Switch 2 as like a, be it cross-platform or a special edition on the Switch 2. Basically we're talking about the final embers of the Switch's life cycle here, and what that legacy is going to be. And I don't know about you, Kai, but I have zero notes, so we're improvising here. But
I hardly even know much about the Switch 2. I mean, obviously not that much news is out yet, but I struggle to keep up with that sort of thing so much, so we're just going to fly by.
I mean, the Switch 2 news is that we're getting Switch 2 news. That's basically
Yeah, basically.
It. But,
it's super interesting, actually, that this late into the Switch's life cycle, they're doing a Direct. Like, it's weird that they're doing a Direct for the Switch, knowing that there is going to be a new console coming out less than a year later. Like, that's bizarre to me.
Because they announced, like, we are getting no news on the Switch 2 in that presentation. And I suppose there's possibility that they announce some games in there that release on both the Switch and Switch 2 and they just don't announce it at the time or whatever. But even still, like, sure, they must have some games coming out before then. But I'd have thought they just announced them randomly on Twitter like they did for the World Championships game, the NES one, you know? So it is interesting. But let's start things off here. I guess I'm going to throw off one that I know both of us would appreciate. And I've heard a few people talking about the possibility of this one. Could we get a Rhythm Heaven game now for the Switch? Because, if I recall correctly, the last one we got was a 3DS game that released basically in the final years of the 3DS as that was dying off. So this is sort of that quiet time where it's the kind of game they would release, and we just got a WarioWare game, you know, just last year, so we're probably not getting another one of those. I mean, it's about time, isn't it? It's been a while.
Yeah, like I say, it has been a while. The last mainline game in the series, the fourth one, was Mega Mix on the 3DS, you're right. And yeah, it's interesting. Megamix didn't have, to my memory, that many new games. It just brought back a lot of them. And it will be interesting if they do something new. Now, the interesting part is that new software that people have got online. That the name escapes me. And I think I talked about it on the podcast. I genuinely can't remember. But it's basically a software that allows people to make their own Rhythm Heaven tracks or whatever you want to call it really easily, their own mixes. So, you know, all of the mini games from across the whole series have been put onto this software, as well as a couple of new ones actually. And you know, everyone used to make loads of like custom Rhythm Heaven mixes online, you know, that's been a thing for years and years. But the fact that there's a software that makes it really easy to do now makes me think like, damn, this is like Mario Maker for Rhythm Heaven. Where do we go from here? Like, surely the creators have got to be aware of this software existing, right? I'm not sure if they do. I've not read much about it. But that puts it into perspective a lot of like, what are they going to do? Is Rhythm Heaven going to have a Switch game? If so, how is it going to work? I think they still could. It's just, you know, something to consider.
It does almost make, if they're going to do like the, you know, quotation marks, quicker and easier method of just doing like a compilation of previous games like they've done before, then that would sort of make that almost a bit redundant in that sense. I'm sure people would still buy it, but like if they wanted to innovate, like do they involve motion controls? Because they didn't with the Wii one, and I'd personally rather they didn't.
Terrible. That would
Yeah,
be terrible. I think they knew from the start not to, because, everything on the Wii was put motion controls in for no reason, and they still
yeah.
didn't do it there, so I'm guessing they know not to.
Then again, the DS had like the whole touchscreen gimmick, which I've never been a big fan of because it feels less accurate in certain games and that. So they have gone gimmicky before, but the fact they
But even the
avoided it with the
3DS
Wii,
one remade the DS game so that there wasn't that anymore, or like there
that's
was an
true.
A and B button version, so they're
That's a
pretty
good
aware
point.
of that sort of thing.
Yeah, at the very least, I think it could be cool involving like HD rumble and like how the controller vibrates to the beat or something like that. That could
Hmm.
be sort of just a neat, not a gimmick, but like a background thing for it. But who knows if they'll do it? But that's I've been waiting on a new one. I love me some rhythm games. I did the Kingdom Hearts one earlier this year, and we could do some more. I'd appreciate it. But
Yeah, I
do
think
you have
it'd be
any?
really fun.
Yeah, and do you have any other ideas, Kai, of something you think we could see or you want to see?
Well, it's tough to say. I think for this direct that we're gonna get, like flat out, I think 90% of it is gonna be like port filler.
Hmm.
It's just gonna be a bunch of ports of random games that like theoretically could work on the Switch but haven't been put on it yet. Just a bunch of
Yeah.
like Steam stuff. I think that's gonna be a large majority. As for other things that will be put on the Switch, like. Yeah, it's just more in that vein. I really don't know what new stuff they'd put on the Switch if it wasn't going to be put on the new console. It would have to be another small series, like you say, but nothing immediately springs to mind for me.
One that I've heard some people throw out there, and this isn't exactly a small series, but it's in the realm of I could see it happening, is like a Fire Emblem remake. Like a remake of.
Mhm.
There's a specific one that people are expecting to be the next one. Is it Genealogy of the Holy War? Is that it? Or.
Probably, yeah, no, I like that. That sounds like an interesting one, yeah.
Yeah, because it's a kind of thing where it's big enough that because obviously they want to save their big hitters for the Switch too. So we're not going to be getting like a brand new Zelda game or anything, or a brand new Mario game or whatever. At least not a big one. But something like a Fire Emblem remake, I think it's just that right level of it could be like their big winter game or such, a bigger release towards the end of the year that will get some notoriety, but also isn't. People aren't going to be upset it's not on the next console. I feel like that's in the
Yeah.
realm of possibility, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I like that one. That sounds good. It's very possible, ports obviously. You just need a lot of graphical remakes. For
Mm.
that game, you would need a lot of graphic redos, obviously. It's a very old game. With very questionable gameplay a lot of the time. God, those old Fire Emblems. So,
Yeah.
interesting to see how that develops. But yeah, honestly, it's not a bad shout. Just things along those lines would probably work of different kinds. For some reason, my mind immediately went to linked crossbow training, which probably isn't what they're going
Oh,
for.
I mean, I like the thought of what if they did like Link's crossbow training, but like in the world of Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild. Like a
That'd be
new
cool.
one as like a small sort of release. I feel like that'd be more likely as like an eShop thing, and maybe that's not something they do. But I hadn't even that hadn't crossed my mind, but that would actually be really fun. Like going through the world of Hyrule, they could basically, they reuse all the assets, so they don't have to make anything too complicated. It's all there. There's a huge plethora of locations they could pick from, and you could do things with like different bow types and equipping different. With the fuse system from Tears of the Kingdom, they could have like gimmick ones as well with different types of arrows you use. So that would actually be the perfect kind of game to hold people over. They're not going to do it, but I want it now. Damn you, Kai.
You never know, honestly, but like, yeah, I really don't know like what else they would throw on it. I mean, there was the whole thing of like Metroid 4, right? That hasn't come out yet. Are
Well,
they
yeah,
gonna do that on the Switch? Wasn't that meant to be like early in the Switch life cycle?
yeah. I mean, that was still like announced as a Switch title, and given how long it's been, it could be pushed back to the Switch 2 or Switch Successor. I almost wonder if, and this is sort of edging a bit onto our next topic as well, but if this could be basically a Breath of the Wild equivalent, a launch game for the Switch 2 that also comes out on the Switch One, but it's slightly less graphically powerful or whatever, or has longer loading times and etc. etc. Like that would be a good kind of game to take that Zelda spot, because obviously we're not launching with a big new Zelda game, given Tears of the Kingdom was only a year ago. But yeah, I guess that does bring up the possibility though of, if we are still building to Prime 4, what about like a Prime 2 and 3 remasters on Switch, or even if they just get ports, but like people would have played the Prime 1 remaster for the first time and might want to catch up before Prime 4 comes out. So those would be good releases, I feel.
Yeah. I mean, it is basically a roulette, isn't it, of like which old game is going to get a port / remaster onto the Switch. Like they're just going to pick a handful from different series, I think.
That has certainly been their trend, because like we said before, Paper Mario Thousand Year Door and Luigi's Mansion are the next two games we know about, remasters, and even NES World Championships is almost, in the sense it's a remaster, it's remixing old NES games, So we could get more. I think more of those is the main thing. Like maybe we get, I don't know, something like a Link Between Worlds on the Switch, which would be awesome, or Yoshi's Woolly World. Like again, we could list off the few remaining Wii U games, the few 3DS games that all are plausible. The only thing, if we're getting something completely brand new, I feel like one game series that would potentially be a contender is Kirby. Because I feel like that's kind of... It's never good. Kirby's generally not this big high-tech series. I feel like you could make a brand new entry in the Kirby series that's just pretty cute and fun, and people would be happy with it just being a Switch game, without being angry that it's not taking advantage of the Switch 2's new power or whatever. I feel like that would probably be a good fit, I suppose.
Wasn't there like a Kirby... Well, it wasn't like a Battle Royale, was it? Or was it like a... There was like a party game for Kirby that was released not too long ago.
There was, on the Switch. Yeah, and then there's like a mode where you had to like roll Kirby down something, or...
Yeah, so maybe it'd be something like that.
Yeah, one of those definitely seems plausible. Like, I feel like... I almost wonder if, and it could even be that the Direct is basically a partner showcase in all but name. Like, I could see that being the case where... Because we still do know things like Sonic Generations is getting a remaster or whatever that's coming to the Switch. There's a few smaller bits like that. Actually, now that I think about it, there's one more Switch game we know about, and that's Pokemon Legends ZA, or ZA, right?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Wait, when's that coming out?
So had I.
Like, was it January or something? I can't remember.
I actually don't remember if they gave a release date. Maybe I should look that up real quick.
I'm gonna check.
But
yeah, that's interesting.
Because it would be like Pokemon. They've released like a game late on the system before. Black and White 2 were released right at the tail end of the DS. I think the Sun and Moon Ultra versions were pretty late in the 3DS cycle. So I wouldn't... Game Freak do their own thing, so I wouldn't put it past them to just have that release as just a Switch thing and have no need to connect that to the Switch 2, even if it is close. But
It says 2025, so it could be before or after the new Switch is out. Like, genuinely, we don't know. It could be a release title for all we know.
It could be, yeah. So that would be an interesting one, because that's besides Prime 4, that's the only other definitive big game we know about. But I feel like we've covered a lot. Are there any other games you think could release on the Switch 2? Any other series that you think might get an entry before we move on, Kai?
Silk Song? I don't know. That's like the one gimme every time, so that's all I got.
Actually, part of me wants to say, what if we got like a Xenoblade Warriors as a final game on the Switch? Which...
I would rather let it be a Switch 2 game, personally.
That's what I was going to say.
Power.
Because Warriors of all series, like if you look at Age of Calamity, like I love that game, but it does... Performance on the Switch is quite iffy, Yeah. So I feel like I wouldn't be surprised though. Like I could imagine them doing it. Whether or not we prefer it on the next console, I could see them still doing it. But
honestly, yeah.
That's the only, because I'm looking through like the big Nintendo series again. a Mario sports game, maybe, but it's we sort of covered most of the bases, and odds are it's going to be something completely weird that we're not expect. Like, hey, here's another Chibi Robo game or something. You know, it's. I mean, none of us would have predicted NES World Championships as one of their final Switch game releases, right? So, who knows? Actually, one last idea. Maybe something like a new party game, like a Switch Party, like the Wii Party series or something. Like, I could see.
Isn't that normally a launch thing? Like, that's basically 1-2 Switch. Or you mean like the Wii Party series, like the board game type vibe?
Yes, that's what I was meaning. Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, I still think they would. I'm actually surprised they didn't do that for the launch of the Switch.
Yeah.
It doesn't strike me as something to be at the end of the life cycle, but hey, I'd welcome it. Those games are fun.
Okay, last one. Switch Music, a sequel to Wii Music.
Unironically, banger choice. I would love that.
Yeah. It's like that's not going to take advantage. Yeah, that's not going to matter. That's not on the Switch too. Its power's not going to be relevant to that. You just need the Joy-Con, the HD Rumble going as you shred to songs like Daydream Believer in a terrible off-key. I mean...
Remember when the Labo was a good thing? Like, they should have done it then.
Yeah.
I'm sure there would have been a lot of collaboration, but the Labo
they
died
had the keyboard.
Pretty swift death, so...
It did.
Never mind. But maybe for the Switch too, I'd love a new Wii Music.
Indeed. I would love to see it. But of course, I mean, we'll find out soon about that at the very least, because we know it's a June Direct, so we'll of course be doing the reaction and discussion all on that when it eventually comes out next month. But let's keep on a little bit further, because when the Switch 2 does release, and we've talked a bit about this with Prime 4 and Pokemon, but are there any games that you think could get a double release on the Switch and Switch 2? Or any games you think might get an enhanced port? Like, are there any that immediately come to mind for you, Kai?
Well, immediately my mind goes to the one that a lot of people were referring to, which is Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting choice, considering Tears of the Kingdom is there.
I was going to say, actually, yeah, that's a point.
Yeah.
Breath of the Wild one.
I think there's something, because it's like Breath of the Wild did this for the Wii U, you know, it came out on the Wii U as well as the Switch.
Yeah.
Like, could Tears of the Kingdom do the same thing here, potentially? Maybe. I mean, it's always weird, like, what do you expect from these games that are going to be on both consoles, right?
Yeah, like...
And it's generally games that have a need for that advanced, like, hardware, something that really benefits from it, where they'll add in an extra something, but in general it's the same game with more processing power. Tears of the Kingdom had some slowdown, but overall I don't think it struggled too much. So the question is, what would they add into the game to sort of advance it a little bit in terms of quality of life without making it just like a DLC?
Yeah, because I could imagine some games just inherently running better on the Switch 2 without being like another buy. But if they're going to actually like resell them in any way, you'd expect at least some new content, like they did with Final Fantasy VII got Integrate, the Yuffie DLC on the PS5 exclusive. And I would almost think Tears of the Kingdom would be a good contender for that. But they talked about it, Aonuma talked about DLC and the fact that we weren't seemingly getting any, and that they were like, they'd wrapped up on the game, right? So I would feel it's unlikely we'd get anything more than that. Like, I don't think we'd get anything more than, hey, here's a patch for the game that makes it run at 60 frames per second or whatever, I feel like that's the most we'll get for Tears of the Kingdom at that point. Like, Odyssey could be interesting. I don't know if they'd
Odyssey could also be interesting, yeah.
Do like, I'd almost say like, release Odyssey, an enhanced version with like another world. But given how long it's been since Odyssey, I think a brand new Mario game launching with the Switch 2 or coming out soon after is more likely than an enhanced Odyssey, if you know what I mean.
No, I see what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, enough time has passed where I feel like that would get more than just an enhanced version. That would be a full-on sequel, if anything.
Yeah, I'm sort of... I mean, for one, I think that Mario Odyssey will get a sequel. The main thing I'm trying to distinguish in my mind is the difference between, like, the game being put onto the new console and DLC as like two different things. So what I'm immediately thinking of is Wind Waker HD, where admittedly I don't know much about it, but I know that game was, it was more of like a quality of life thing with very minute helpful additions rather than outright new content. So it's the question of how that would form within these games. What slight things could you add that aren't just new content? And honestly, it's very difficult. Like, I haven't played Tears of the Kingdom in quite a while now, so I can't remember what quality of life things would be appreciated, but I'm sure there definitely are some.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, like if they did a Wind Waker HD and redid like the lighting engine or something like that, So it was more than just prettier, not just like upscaled, but actually you're seeing it in a different light. Yes, and it's hard. I guess like it depends as well, like if there are new features to because we still know very little about the console itself, other than rumors are it's going to be more powerful. I mean, we all figured that anyway. But is there anything specific that would have, for example, the equivalent of, the Wii U, of course, of the gamepad, and the big upgrade there was you could manage all your items on the gamepad. And I don't think we're going to be getting anything that big to the Switch 2, but there could be some sort of new console, smaller console feature that could be re-implemented into games, like the second gamepad, to make things run a little smoother. But as to what that could be, who knows what those wizards at Nintendo are cooking up, but it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, the only thing I'm really imagining is I'm sure there must have been some limitations for Tears of the Kingdom because of how much it's already processing that, like, for example, I could be wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's why there's a limit before things like fans expire, or why you can only connect so many items together. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if there were a couple of Zono devices that didn't work because they took up too much processing power. So I think maybe stuff around that whole system and the physics engine could be revamped, where they're like, look, we have more power, you can connect 10 more things together, things last twice as long before they expire, and look, here's 5 new Zono devices that didn't work previously that now do because of the power. I could be completely off the mark with that, but that's the only thing I can think about off the top of my head. So maybe?
Yeah. No, I can see that. I think that's a good shout. Like, obviously the building, even though I am too dumb to understand basic building structures beyond the simple boat in Tears of the Kingdom, like that is a huge selling point of the game for many people. And being able to expand upon that and add more ways that you can construct would be a big deal. Because you definitely feel it, like things like you're limited in how much you can fly around the overworld before your thing crashes and burns. So if they expand that at all, like, yeah, I could see that adding like a lot of variety to the game without actually adding major new content. Because
so I guess the question is where else they go. Any other game, like you said, like what can they do with that? I don't know.
Yeah, it's like obviously my main thought goes to like Xenoblade 3. What could they do there? But it's hard to think of other than certain areas not losing the graphical fidelity. Basic fidelity improvements. But other than that, like, and Xenoblade 3's a pretty perfect experience, and like what. As great as it was, like, it's a huge game. What would make me play it again, Would I want to, even with graphical improvements?
Yeah,
I'd probably
it already patched a lot of issues, is the thing.
Yeah.
They already fixed a lot of that stuff. If they didn't fix a lot of that stuff, like the cooking being broken or whatever, then yeah, having a new version of that would have been revolutionary, but it's fixed a lot of its issues now. The only thing I can imagine is the whole, like, menu music and that sort of thing, and chain attack music, but... Nah, I don't think they'd go that direction. It just doesn't feel like something they'd do. Although, actually, I say that, Xenoblade 2 they might. I think Xenoblade 1 they wouldn't, because that's more polished and recent. Xenoblade 3 they've done a lot of patches. Xenoblade 2 has had a long time since it's got any patches. It's technically the earliest one of the trilogy, in terms of its latest release. And a lot of the stuff in the base game does still feel a little bit clunky or broken. Things like the blades being like having to equip certain ones and having all those issues or whatever. Like, I think there's a lot of quality of life they could do there. Yeah,
there is so much they could do with like how the affinity charts work and how certain blades they could like smooth over details in there. like you say, with like field skills being revamped, and just getting the balancing issues of like the pull system. Like even if they removed the gacha system to some extent, not or tampered with it so that when you beat the game, you're able to get certain ones easier. Like
stronger
Xenoblade 2, you're right.
Yeah,
that game. It's been a while since it released, and it's certainly the one in need of the most quality of life improvements. Whereas if they, okay, now we're talking. Xenoblade 2 Definitive Edition would actually be perfect, and they know like Xenoblade 2 is still the best-selling one. Pyra and Mithra are still two of the biggest selling characters of the series. It would do well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the other two don't have much of a purpose, but this game, yeah, sure. I mean, there's always X, but like X is a whole different discussion we've done a million times by now, so we don't need to worry about that one. But Xenoblade 2, maybe, I don't know.
They could do some things like, the Noah and Mio amiibo give you like Noah and Mio outfits for Nia and Rex or something, as well in the game. Just a few small things like that. That if any game on the Switch could use it, that's an interesting thought, because I've been thinking of like what recent games are they gonna like push further. But that is actually the smart way of looking at it, is what older games on the Switch could use an upgrade. And now I'm like trying to catalogue through my Switch library in my mind to go through them. Like, again, that's something you could do for like an Age of Calamity, that could really use some polishing up, I think, of like how you get certain materials, and like some of the end quests were really grindy in that. Not to mention the obviousness of making it actually run in a frame rate that is functional. But even beyond just the frame rate, like you go on like the Great Plateau level and you look in the distance and it's all like completely untextured in that, because it's trying to load the full world. Like that would take more than just a quick performance patch. That would take a revamp. So something like Age of Calamity getting actually a deluxe edition would make sense in that degree, I feel.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like that, I think any of the Warriors games really apply to that.
Yeah.
I remember playing the demo of Free Hopes, and it wasn't particularly appealing either in terms of how it looked. But any of the Warriors games they can always do with something improved. I guess the only other extra thing to consider is something you alluded to earlier, which is if the Switch 2 ends up doing anything unique. What if it's not just a hardware improvement? Nintendo loves their gimmicks. What's the gimmick for this new console going to be? We genuinely don't know. We've discussed this before and we're not sure what it's going to be. But I think whatever it is, we will then suddenly have a huge amount of new ideas in terms of what they could do to revamp old games. That's kind of something we're waiting on, I suppose.
Yeah, if they did something with a second screen that opens up DS remasters and Wii U remasters and stuff in the more expanded degree rather than being compacted. If they did something like that, you could have like Splatoon. You could do something like Splatoon, but with the old Splatoon controls, where you can look at the map on your screen and tap to where you want to go, or Pikmin, and give it the control system you liked back on the Wii U with Pikmin or something. So any sort of change they make to the hardware will definitely affect how they go about any remasters. That's a good point, yeah. But it's hard to predict what that would be, given Nintendo's capacity to do weird shit, basically. But
yeah, honestly, it could be anything. We've had touch screens, motion controls, the Switch, being on, doing its special controller stuff, the Wii U's gamepad. What's next? We don't know, but it's going to affect a lot of that.
Yeah. Off topic from that, though, the final game that comes to mind for me, an older game that I could see them doing an enhanced version of. What if they did that for Fire Emblem Three Houses? Because that is a very beloved entry. I mean, it did very well. And, of course, when it comes to, the three routes and how they operate, it comes to things like, certain routes feeling unpolished. Could they do a version of that, say, adds more voice acting and cutscenes to it, but keeps the same story, and doesn't really add much more than that, but a slight revamp on it? That, I guess you compare it to a Persona 5 Royal in some way, or something like that, for Three Houses. Or
that would be a whole new thing, which would be bold, but if they were going to do it for any game in the Fire Emblem series, it would be that one.
Yeah, like there's a reason they did a Fire Emblem Three Hopes, you know. It was the big entry on the Switch. I'm sure it did better than Engage. Obviously, it's had more time, but and it definitely could use it as well. You know, the graphical improvements. Engage really went a long way to making the game look prettier. So Three Hopes could use it, but are there any other entries that come to mind? Because I'm trying to run through old games, but I'm sort of running a blank now. But does anything come to mind for you, Kai, before we end off?
Nothing specific, to be honest. I really think it will depend on the gimmick of the console. Where we'll probably revisit this. Until that point, it's very tough to predict what they might revamp. Nothing else immediately comes to mind.
Yeah, whatever it is, I know, like, I'm enjoying this peaceful moment where I'm going through my backlog and playing games I didn't get a chance to. But when the floodgates open,
isn't it?
Yeah, it's gonna change. The floodgates are gonna open suddenly, and I'm excited for it. Scared, but excited at the same time. So it's gonna be interesting. But that is pretty much it. I think that's all we've got to say about what we think could be coming from the final embers of the Switch. Of course, we'll be here reporting on anything when the Switch 2 does get announced, when we get that June Direct. We'll be covering all here on BunchaJokahs in reactions and our discussions and our main podcast first Sunday of each month, where we talk about the backlog games we've been playing through also. So you can find that here on BunchaJokahs, be it on YouTube or audio-only versions on Spotify and other podcasting sites, all under the name BunchaJokahs. But Kai, where else can people find you at?
Twitch.tv/Vescarine. I'm there. I'm doing stuff.
He is doing stuff. Voice of Cards, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the main one at the moment. Yep.
And actually, now I think about it, Inazuma 11, maybe that'll get like a big Switch upgrade. Yeah.
It'll be delayed until that new one comes out. I bet.
That's what I'm thinking.
Unironically, it will. Like, that's not even a joke.
It's quite plausible. But of course, whenever that happens, we'll be talking about that too. And also a big thanks to our friend Sam, our graphic designer who makes our logo and thumbnails, and there'll be a link to his Twitter in the description below. But until then, we'll see what happens with the Switch, and we'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.
See ya.
Yippee!